They didn't even spell my name right on the seat card. Grace Bennett, not Bennett. Just one apostrophe T. Just enough to remind me I didn't quite belong. The calligraphy was beautiful, sure, gold ink on thick ivory stock, but it didn't matter. The missing letter hit harder than the cold wind sweeping through the stone steps of the Bennett estate. I stood still, gripping the card, trying not to let my stomach turn as I caught the reflection of the reception hall in the tall, arched glass behind me. Laughter echoed faintly, blending with the gentle clink of crystal glasses. "Excuse me, miss, are you—" "Grace?" a young usher asked, eyes darting between me and a clipboard. "Yes," I said. My voice was even, polite. "Table H," he said, pointing past the main doors, down a hallway lined with coat racks. "Just past the side exit, before the staff lounge." I blinked. "I'm not listed in the main hall." "No, ma'am. That's the list I was given." I didn't argue. Not yet. I walked slowly through the corridor, heels clicking lightly against marble that gleamed like it had something to prove. Outside the banquet room, the doors loomed tall, etched with swirling vines and glass panes. Behind them, the world sparkled. Candles, chandeliers, roses in full blush. I stepped into the hallway, turned a corner, and there it was. A small folding table, 2 chairs, one of them already occupied by a half-empty tray of cocktail shrimp someone must have abandoned. My place card lay on the edge, fluttering slightly in the draft. Grace Bennett. I picked it up again and stared at it. Bennett, not Bennett. I tried to laugh, tried. I turned back, made my way toward the main entrance. I needed answers, needed something. My hand touched the edge of the seating chart. Mom's name, Claudia Bennett, sat proudly beside Daniel's. Dad, Henry Bennett, just under. Daniel's fiancé's family filled the rest of the head table. Friends, investors, golf buddies, all accounted for. Just not me. "Grace?" Claudia's voice drifted over before I even saw her. She stood near the photo arch, arranging the bride's veil. Her movements were graceful, elegant, and practiced. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Can I talk to you a moment?" She turned her head, but didn't stop adjusting the lace. "We're in the middle of photos. Can it wait?" "It'll just take a minute." She sighed and turned, gesturing for one of the assistants to continue. Her eyes scanned me. My dress, my hair, my hands. "What is it?" I was seated outside, near the coat room. Claudia blinked. There wasn't enough space inside. We had to prioritize key guests. "I'm your daughter." Her lips curved slightly, almost pitying. "Grace, don't make this about you. Daniel's day is stressful enough." Before I could respond, Daniel appeared, adjusting his cuffs, a wide grin on his face. He was always the golden one. Tall, charming, dressed in a cream tux that probably cost more than my entire car. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes flicking between us. "I'm seated in the hallway," I said. He looked amused. "It's just a chair, Grace. You're always so intense." Claudia touched his arm. "Go back inside, darling. I'll handle this." Daniel smirked as he walked away. Claudia turned back to me. "Why are you making this difficult?" "I'm not. I just thought—" "No, you assumed," she said, voice firm. "You assumed this wedding was about you." "No," I said, more quietly. "I assumed this family still remembered I existed." She shook her head slightly, as if I was embarrassing her. "We've always known you were different, Grace. Independent. Daniel needed more." I looked at her, really looked, and felt a cold distance I couldn't ignore anymore. Her eyes, once a comfort, now looked like glass. I turned, walked back down the hallway, each step dull and hollow. I sat in the tiny corner they'd assigned me, the card still in my hand. People passed by. Some nodded. Most didn't notice. One woman glanced at me and said, "Oh, are you staff?" I didn't answer. Outside, the wind picked up. The window beside me rattled slightly. Inside, a round of applause broke out, probably for Daniel's speech or Claudia's toast. I pressed the card flat on the table, smoothed the edge, and felt something shift. Not pain, not even anger, just recognition. I wasn't invited here to be seen. They made room for everyone else. Photographers, stylists, investors, influencers. Just not for me. Not really. I was the afterthought, the footnote. A second name spelled wrong. I looked down again. Grace Bennett. One it. Not even worth two. She clutches her seat card and thinks, if they won't make space for me, maybe I'll carve one myself. I thought the bride looked radiant, until I saw the groom staring at the shadows. The wisteria vines overhead danced in the breeze, casting trembling purple shadows on the stone path. Grace leaned lightly against the cold balustrade, one heel slightly crooked on the uneven tile. From the open windows of the reception hall, the soft sound of a cello spilled out, a delicate string of notes meant to soothe, but they felt almost mocking now. Daniel had always been the center of things. From birthdays to holidays, he stood in the spotlight with ease while Grace lingered on the edges, watching through the slats. There was that one birthday, years ago, when he accidentally locked her out on the patio. She'd spent an hour outside in her best dress, waiting for someone to notice she was missing. No one had. That night, Claudia had smoothed Grace's hair and said, "Daniel deserves all the attention. You're strong, Grace." She didn't feel strong now. The sound of footsteps made her turn. A man stood at the garden's edge, framed by tall hedges and late summer sunlight. He was tall, lean, handsome in a quietly rumpled way. His tuxedo was perfect, but his tie was half loosened like he'd been wrestling with it. Lucas Harper, the groom. He didn't see her at first. He stood facing the vines, his back to the reception, his shoulders stiff. Grace watched him for a beat longer than was polite. Then he spoke. "Hell of a view, isn't it?" "Depends where you're standing," she replied, her voice calm but edged. He turned, and their eyes met for the first time. His were blue, but not the cold kind, more like overcast skies, clouded by something unspoken. "You're Daniel's sister," he said, more like a statement than a question. "Technically," she replied. Lucas offered a tired smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I saw where they seated you." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know anyone saw that far down the hall." "I did." He shifted, looking suddenly unsure. "And it didn't sit right." She folded her arms. "Nothing about today does." Lucas hesitated. Then, with a suddenness that felt more like desperation than confidence, he said, "Can I ask you something, off the record?" Grace tilted her head. "This isn't a press conference, Lucas." He gave a half laugh. "Right. Sorry. I need to know. Has Daniel ever—" He paused, then pulled out his phone. "I found these last night. He left his laptop open. I wasn't snooping. He showed her the screen. The message was brief, but damning. "Once the Harper deal locks in, we're golden. Marriage just speeds it up. She's sweet on the outside, but she'll sign anything I slide across the table." Grace read it twice, then again. She handed the phone back, slower this time. Her pulse had quickened, though her voice stayed measured. "You're not imagining things." Lucas blinked. "So you've seen this side of him before?" "I've lived it," she said. "Different script, same play." He nodded, like puzzle pieces were clicking together in his head, and he didn't like the picture forming. "I kept thinking maybe I was being paranoid." "Or maybe you were raised to trust," Grace said, not unkindly. "That can be dangerous in this family." A silence fell between them. Not awkward, just loaded. Lucas looked down at the garden path, then back at her. "I don't know what to do." Grace didn't answer, because she didn't know either. But then a voice, calm, steady, unmistakably in control, drifted toward them. "I'd suggest we don't panic. We planned Marcia Harper stepped into the corridor as though she'd been standing there all along. Her navy dress shimmered beneath the dappled sunlight, and her heels clicked with a deliberateness that made both Grace and Lucas straighten instinctively. "I'm sorry," Lucas said. "Were you listening?" "I was observing," Marcia corrected. She smiled, polished but firm. "And I believe it's time we stopped underestimating your brother." Grace glanced at Marcia, unsure of what she meant, but then Marcia reached into her clutch and retrieved a sleek black folder. 2 weeks ago, she said, handing it to Grace, my legal assistant flagged a strange login attempt on my firm's prenup archive. Someone tried to access the file you and I drafted, Lucas. Grace flipped it open. There it was, an attempted login using a fake firm credential, traced back to Daniel's old business email. The timestamp matched the same night Daniel had shown up at the Harper house, unexpectedly, with champagne and a grin. Lucas's jaw tightened. He tried to read our prenup? He failed, Marcia said, but he left fingerprints. Grace looked between them. The pieces were clicking fast now, faster than she'd expected. He wants leverage, Lucas said slowly. He's using me. Marcia nodded. And me. And this wedding. He's betting on a payout before the ink dries. Lucas stared at the screen again, then at the garden, then at nothing. Then this wedding is a lie. Grace. Not yet. But it could become truth if we don't act. There was a room in the house no one mentioned anymore. Turns out that's where the real inheritance lived. The hallway leading to the second floor of the Bennett estate had a different kind of silence. Not the polite, muffled hush of guests and waitstaff, but the heavy stillness of disuse, of secrets tucked behind aging wallpaper and time-worn wood. Grace walked behind Marcia, each step a quiet rebellion, her breath shallow but focused. The last time she'd been on this floor, she was barely 14. There had been a locked drawer in her mother's bedroom. She'd asked once, naive, curious, what was inside. Claudia had looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Nothing for you." Grace hadn't asked again. Marcia stopped in front of a tall wooden door framed by dust and faint cobwebs. It had no nameplate, just a tarnished handle and a faint outline where an old brass sign had been unscrewed. "This was the legal archive," Marcia murmured. "When your grandfather still handled family matters by paper?" Grace raised an eyebrow. "And you just happen to have a key?" "I represented him in 2 land disputes. He trusted me more than he trusted his own children." Her voice was neutral, but there was a chill beneath it. She inserted a slim gold key into the lock and twisted. The door opened with a groan, revealing a room untouched by time, or maybe just ignored by it. Shelves lined the walls, bowed under the weight of thick folders and leather-bound ledgers. Boxes sat in orderly rows, labeled in faded ink. The air smelled of old paper, varnish, and something deeper. Memory, maybe. Marcia stepped aside. "After you." Grace walked in slowly, her fingers grazing the edge of a filing cabinet as though she might disturb something sacred. Outside, the lake glowed gold beneath the setting sun, light flickering across the dust in lazy waves. "Start with the box marked, Trusts, Family, 2007 plus," Marcia said. She moved toward a scanner in the corner. Of course she brought one, and began powering it on, calm as a librarian before opening hours. Grace found the box. It was heavy, bound in brass clasps, and tucked beneath a stack labeled Property Disputes, Oregon Lot. She knelt, tugged the box free, and placed it on the long oak desk. Inside were letters, some typed, some handwritten, contracts, notarized forms. But it was one envelope, sealed in thick, yellowing parchment and addressed in sharp cursive to Claudia Bennett. Private. That caught her eye. She broke the seal. Inside, a letter. Her grandfather's handwriting, unmistakable. It began with warmth, memories of Grace as a child, her curiosity, her love for the land. Then came the line that changed everything. "Of my 3 grandchildren, only Grace has shown the character and integrity I believe worthy of stewarding the Bennett estate. She shall be named primary heir to all family holdings currently under my trust." Grace read the sentence again and again. Her hands trembled slightly, but her jaw stayed firm. "Marcia," she said, her voice steady. Marcia walked over, eyes scanning the letter. "I knew he'd made a change. I just never saw it in writing." Underneath the letter was another document, a legal memo, unsigned, but marked received, August 2017. It was from Claudia. "As discussed, please delay informing Grace Bennett of any amendments to Edward Bennett's estate plans until Daniel is married and settled. We must ensure family stability and discretion." There it was. The theft, Not with weapons or force, but with quiet ink and entitled silence. Grace felt her chest tighten, not with sadness this time, but clarity. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate erasure, a choice to keep her invisible until she was no longer a threat. She looked up. They knew, all this time. Marcia nodded. And they counted on your silence. Not anymore. Grace stood straighter. We scan everything, all of it. Marcia didn't hesitate. Within minutes, documents were running through the feed. Inheritance letters, Claudia's memo, trust clauses. Each beep from the scanner felt like a small gavel striking justice. I'll store it 3 ways, Marcia said. Encrypted, local, cloud. 1 copy with me, 1 with you, 1 that auto-sends if anything happens. Grace didn't ask what anything meant. She knew. She looked out the tall window. The lake shimmered, soft winds rustling the garden below, where guests still laughed, unaware. But the tide had turned, and she wasn't on the sidelines anymore. Marcia turned to her, placing the final folder back in the box. We go public. Your way or mine? Grace's eyes didn't leave the window. Let's start with the family. If they still want a wedding, they'll get a show. You asked me to sit outside. Now you'll all sit and listen. The words settled like a blade across the room, sharp and cold. Grace stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her fingers resting lightly on a stack of neatly arranged documents. Behind her, velvet curtains billowed softly with the late afternoon breeze, casting slow-moving shadows over the gleaming wood. The room smelled faintly of furniture polish and dust, but beneath it, something else lingered. Old pride, tension, and the fading illusion of control. Across from her sat Claudia, legs crossed, arms folded. Daniel leaned back in his chair, still in his tux, trying to maintain that same lazy smirk he always used to get away with things. Henry was beside him, quiet and gray-faced. At the far end, Uncle Roy sat like a sentinel, unmoved, unblinking. Marcia stood off to Grace's right, the picture of composure in navy silk, tablet in hand. Lucas sat to her left, his jaw tight, hands folded as if to hold something. His anger, perhaps, steady. Grace took a breath. You all know why we're here, she said. Or you should. Daniel chuckled. We're wasting daylight on dramatics. No, Lucas said, voice flat. We're reclaiming the truth. Grace lifted the first document from the table and slid it across to Claudia. This is a log from Marcia's firm. It shows multiple attempts to access her prenup files relating to Lucas's assets. The IP address traces back to your private network, Daniel. Claudia didn't touch the page. This is absurd. It's logged, Marcia replied, calm but crisp. Time-stamped, documented, verified. The firm's IT department has provided a digital trail. Grace turned to Daniel. Do you want to deny it? Daniel shrugged. If someone used my account, that's not my fault. Lucas's voice was low. You bragged about locking in the Harper deal. You said I'd sign anything you put in front of me. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Daniel sat up straighter now, eyes narrowing. You're twisting things. No, Grace said, sliding a second sheet across the table. This is a letter from my grandfather. He wrote it before he passed, naming me the primary heir to the Bennett family trust and land. Not Daniel. Not anyone else. Claudia's fingers twitched. Grace continued, sliding one final document into view. And this is a memo you sent to the family lawyers, Claudia, instructing them to delay notifying me of any inheritance until Daniel was settled. You buried the truth. For a moment, the room was still. Henry cleared his throat, speaking for the first time in what felt like years. I let silence cover too many sins. Claudia turned sharply toward him. Henry, no, he said. I watched it happen, and I let it happen, because it was easier. Uncle Roy exhaled, long and disappointed. I thought we raised this family better. Daniel's smirk cracked. So what? You want me disowned? You want the house? The money? No, Grace said. I want honesty. But since that's off the table, let's talk consequences. Lucas reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a crisp white envelope. He placed it on the table in front of Daniel. "You know what this is?" he asked. Daniel didn't answer. "Annulment papers," Lucas said. "Already signed." Claudia gasped. "You're joking." Lucas's voice was calm, almost eerie. "There will be no vows today." Daniel's eyes went wide, finally blinking, like a man realizing the room is on fire. And then Claudia stood. Her voice shook, not from fear, but fury. "You think you've won, Grace? You just broke this family." Grace didn't flinch. "Number you broke it. I just stopped pretending." The music played, the doors opened, and the bride never appeared. But the scandal did. The first notes of the string quartet floated through the reception hall like silk, soft and soaring. Guests turned toward the grand entrance in anticipation, glasses raised, phones poised. Ivory roses lined the aisle. A champagne tower shimmered beneath the chandeliers, glittering in the golden haze of early evening. But no bride came through the doors. Instead, it was Grace. She walked in alone, heels clicking deliberately across the marble floor. The room didn't hush all at once. It rippled, whispers cascading from table to table like wind through leaves. Some recognized her, others only saw the file folder clutched in her hand. And a few, like Emily near the rear left corner, raised their phones, not in confusion, but instinct. Emily knew the moment had arrived. Earlier that day, she'd pulled Grace aside near the garden trellis, sunglasses pushed to the top of her head, a half grin tugging at her mouth. "This family loves a performance," she'd said, low enough not to be heard. "You ready to take center stage?" Now, Grace stepped up to the stage, literally. The mic stand was meant for toasts. The slideshow screen behind her had been prepped for a montage of Daniel and his almost wife. Instead, Grace laid the folder beside the mic and took one slow breath. Claudia moved first, breaking from her seat, lips tight with alarm. "Grace, don't do this." "Stay seated, Mother," Grace said, voice even. "This will be short." Marcia stood in the back, eyes locked on the crowd. She stepped up beside Grace, holding a sleek tablet and handing her the mic. "This isn't a wedding," Grace began, voice calm but echoing. "This was a heist in lace." A stunned silence blanketed the room. She opened the folder, holding up a letter. 3 years ago, my grandfather, Edward Bennett, amended his will. In it, he named me, not Daniel, as the primary heir to the Bennett Trust and land holdings. This letter was delivered to my mother. She chose not to share it. She placed the letter down and picked up another document. This is a memo from Claudia Bennett, dated months after my grandfather passed. In it, she instructed the family's lawyers to delay informing me of the inheritance until Daniel was settled, until he married, until he could consolidate. Gasps scattered like raindrops across the room. Daniel stood then, trying to push through the crowd, his voice raised. "This is insane. These are lies." Grace turned to him, her expression almost gentle. "The only lie was pretending you ever earned any of it." Claudia's face had gone pale, her mouth a tight line of panic. "We are not doing this here." "We are," Marcia said simply, stepping to the side and tapping her tablet. The main screen behind them flickered. Text logs appeared, clearly time-stamped. The words lit up across the projection in clean black font. "Once the Harper deal locks in, we're golden. Marriage just speeds it up. She'll sign anything. The Bennett name sells stability." Daniel used this wedding, Grace continued, not just to access the Harper estate, but to strengthen his claim over a trust that was never his. People were standing now. A man near the head table muttered, "What the hell?" A woman whispered to her friend, "She's the older sister, right?" Emily, without a word, hit record. "And in case you're wondering," Grace said, her voice steel now, "this isn't about bitterness. It's about erasure. I was never meant to be seen, but I am here. And the legal transfer? It's already done. Signed, notarized, 2 days ago." She stepped back from the mic. The room erupted, not in cheers, not in outrage, but in something more potent. Realization. A murmur rolled through the guests. Some stood. Others turned in their seats to look at Claudia, at Daniel, at Henry, who now stood slowly, steadying himself on the edge of the table. "I watched this happen," he said, not loudly, but clearly. "I knew something was wrong. I didn't stop it, but I see her now, and I'm proud." That silence, the one that followed, was unlike the others. Claudia looked around, her mask cracking, Daniel beside her fuming, breath shallow and fast. Emily tapped the screen on her phone once. A single clip went live. Bride never showed, but the real daughter did. Within minutes, it hit 50,000 views. A week later, the only invitation I got was to dinner with my mother. I declined. The text sat unread on Grace's phone, a blinking blue bubble that had already outstayed its welcome. She didn't delete it, just let it linger there, like a postcard from a country she had no plans to visit. Her Boston apartment was quiet. Not the lonely kind of quiet, but something softer, chosen. Outside, the autumn wind tickled the window panes, leaves skittering along the sidewalk like they couldn't decide where to land. The boxes were mostly unpacked now, shelves only half filled. Minimalist, some might say. Intentional, she would. She sipped coffee slowly, staring out at the Charles River. The last of the sun shimmered off the water, turning ripples to gold. In her hand, the familiar place card, Grace Bennett, Table H. The crease where she had once clutched it too tightly was still there, right through the middle of her name. Her phone buzzed again. Voicemail, Henry Bennett. She almost ignored it, but something about the name made her press play. His voice was slower now, rough around the edges. "I'm not good with words, you know that. But when you stood up in that room, I saw you. For the first time. Maybe ever. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I'm sorry I let them dim you. I just wanted you to know that." She didn't replay it. She didn't need to. It wasn't absolution she was looking for. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. Another message pinged through, from Lucas. "I didn't just dodge a bad marriage. I gained a compass. Thank you." Grace smiled, just barely. Later that evening, she took a walk along the river. The wind was brisk, tugging gently at her coat, but she welcomed the bite. Her steps were slow, unhurried. Every footfall felt like a small reclaiming, of space, of breath, of self. She found a bench beneath a maple tree just starting to shed. From her bag, she pulled a thick envelope. Inside, the final copies of the trust transfer. All legal, all sealed, all hers. She didn't open it. She'd already read it twice. Instead, she placed it in a simple wooden box at her side and closed the lid with a quiet finality. There was nothing left to prove. Back home, she sat at her writing desk, opened a clean leather-bound journal, and carefully taped the Table H card inside. The ink was still faintly golden, as if trying to hold on to the lie of elegance. Beneath it, she wrote in smooth, firm letters, "Not your seat, not your shame." She closed the journal and stood, her reflection caught in the darkened window. A woman no longer waiting for a place at someone else's table. Her phone was still on the nightstand. She picked it up, opened her travel app, and booked a one-way flight. Destination, Lisbon, departure, Friday. Her first journey planned for herself, by herself. Though the celebration never happened, the truth took center stage, and this time everyone was watching. What began as a silent seat by the coat room ended with the unraveling of a legacy built on lies. Justice didn't arrive with fury, but with evidence, resolve, and the quiet defiance of someone no longer willing to be erased. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Grace didn't burn bridges. She simply walked past them, toward a horizon she no longer needed permission to claim. Some inherit wealth, others inherit silence. She chose neither.